So welcome everyone. Today we are going to speak with Kavita Ryali. She is a diversity and inclusion coach and a mentor. She is Argonne Research Women in Tech Award winner for 2020 and speaker and panelist at Grace Hopper. She works in Microsoft as a principal program manager. So today we are going to talk about team effectiveness. So Kavita, I would like to know how you can build an effective team.
Thank you, Rafat, for this opportunity, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. I think more and more as we are looking into getting into the endemic era, right, post pandemic, the role of a manager and the role of understanding how teams work becomes even more critical, right? We're seeing, according to one of the studies that I realized that, under 20% of the teams are truly engaged. So the challenge for managers is how do you engage teams and how do you ensure that we have effective teams working towards more productive and more, I think, engagement that is required in organizations. So while most of my background and experience is in Microsoft, the approach that I have taken, the frameworks that I have used, have been also leveraged in other organizations. I was also part of two startups for about a year, and I have leveraged these models over there as well. So the one that I think, Rafat, you have seen is called the GRPI model of team effectiveness. And
Yes.
this is, it goes back to a person named Richard Beckard back in the 1970s. The GRPI stands for goals for G, R stands for roles, P stands for process and tools, and I stands for individual relationships. And this almost forms like a pyramid, right? And each of these are critical to maintain effective teams. So I think the most important one is the I in the GRPI model. So if you look at it, the team is about people, right? So individual relationships, understanding their behaviors, understanding their personalities, and understanding how a manager can leverage their strengths becomes a very, very critical piece of the puzzle, right? So once we know what is the team made up of, and also in the hiring process, you are able to hire the right talent for the right role, right? So having that relationship in terms of understanding whether you have introverts, extroverts, what are the strengths, that a team can comprise, that becomes an important one. The next one is the process and tools. For example, in
So, Kavita, sorry to interrupt. What I'm wondering before we move away from interpersonal skills, as you said, it is the most important, this is the base of the pyramid. Do you recommend any kind of tool or, again, processes or methods to know about the team, right? Like we know about something called SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. So, do you have any recommendation to understand team for that? Is there any tool?
I think that's a great question you have in terms of clicking down, right? How do we understand personalities? In one of the startups that I was part of, we used to do personality tests. So there is many available today, like Myers-Briggs, right? And then also individual tests. We used to have a couple of them in Microsoft where we would read, with four colors, red, blue, green, and yellow, that would interpret as whether a person is more, data driven or more social or more conceptual. And that kind of understanding, if a team member A has a certain personality and strengths in understanding their traits, you can map back to how they would interact with another person in the team.
I remember doing that test in Microsoft, and I did twice when I was not a manager, and then a couple of years after being manager, and I saw my colors completely change. That was a really good test. I don't remember what was that test called.
Emergenetics. Emergenetics.
Emergenetics.
Yeah, that.
It's really a good way to know the team and who is who. And in fact, to know yourself too, because I remember blogging about it. It was pretty eye-opening for me because I see myself differently and my team members saw me differently, completely different. So it was very interesting.
It helps build a very mutual understanding about, if something kind of ticks you off, why the person is behaving in that way because of these personality traits.
Right,
So it helps
right.
to build empathy, and it also helps to build that close relationship, a working relationship to strengthen, right? So I would recommend these tools. Some of them are expensive, but I think there are also third party, as I said, Myers-Briggs, there are, free tests available. So you can also know about, the setup, the composition of personalities that you have.
Sure, perfect. So now we know about the I part. Now above that, it P, processes. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
So, yeah, I mean, this is by far, I think, the most critical and important in terms of the functioning, right? The day to day work that you have to get done. And here again, one of the things that I have leveraged is, Six Sigma methodologies, processes. So it's people, process, technology, but the process, how do you engage with different teams, cross functional teams? We have something called ADO, which is Azure DevOps. We leverage, agile methodologies. Right, back in the days, we would have waterfall technology and methodology to that. But as teams are growing, we are getting more adaptive. So one of the tools in the processes that we engage is to leverage this tool. Right, outside of Microsoft, we've used Jira, right, which is leveraged for project management, and also how do you engage with cross-functional teams across the board. Microsoft is a massive global organization. So that becomes all the more challenging to track dependencies, to track deadlines, to track milestones, etc. So yeah, on the project management, program management, we have ADO, Jira, outside of Microsoft, and also process improvements, right? There's a ton of tools like FEMIA, which is failure mode effects analysis. Oftentimes, if you're driving a particular service or program or product, there are chances that you're doing risk tracking, right? So how do you understand failure modes? This is one of the tools that you can leverage. And the beauty about these processes and tools is it's not Microsoft specific. You can use it across organizations, across teams, and I think it really facilitates productivity. Over and above that, you can have communication tools, right? Productivity tools. Obviously, you will need something like Slack and Teams to really have that, both that one-on-one, ease of conversation, and also much more larger meetings, etc. Right?
So, Kavita, I'm just wondering. So, this framework says that you should have a process, and for process, you are using different tools. You are using Jira. Somebody may use Azure Board or something else. Uh, and for communication, you are having different tools. So, does this framework recommend you any specific tools as such, or any methodology as such that you must use Agile or Scrum or Kanban or anything like that? Or this framework just says have some process?
Think it's the latter, that you should have a process to maintain some sort of sanity in the system, right? Now, it doesn't recommend that you have to be using, or doesn't be prescriptive about X tool versus Y tool, but as long as you have a process, it is critical to ensure that the teams are functioning in a well-oiled manner, right, and in a much
Okay.
more functional manner, much more engaged manner. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next, rung in the GRPI model is roles. As you know, a team comprises not one, two, sometimes it's big organizations, big teams, anywhere between 1 to 50 or maybe even hundreds of people in an
Mhm.
organization. So as we engage, because we have interdependencies, it becomes very important to define the roles and responsibilities, right? So this is where a tool called RACI, I am sure you have heard it,
Yeah, yeah.
we often use. So this is, I think, very simple in terms of how it's defined. Yet when we are engaging with different teams, how do you define the engagement model? This becomes very important.
Mhm.
So it is very clear who is doing what and what is the responsibility in a program or an initiative that is running across, maybe 5 to 10 to 20 teams. And we are talking about, functions like developers, program managers, product managers, data science, marketing, industry teams, right? Test teams, right? Like it's just across, again, depending on which organization, the composition of these cross-functional teams is different, and then even between, for example, PMs, right? What is the role and responsibility between two teams? In summary, what I wanted to emphasize is that is as we leverage the GRPI framework, knowing the roles, having that clarity, driving towards removing any kind of ambiguity in roles and delivery leads to execution excellence, right? So that is where the R becomes very important in terms of knowing the roles. And, that's how I have leveraged. And, in the least, we should at least have a engagement model, right? To define, okay, what are you delivering? What am I delivering? That clarity of accountability and ownership, I think, helps drive effective teams. So the last one in the whole GRPI framework is goals. I think even if you have a good team, right, effective team, and you have the right tools and processes in place, a team without a North Star, a set of goals, a set of objectives is not going to be productive at the end of the day, right? This is where we have, tools like driving OKRs, which is objectives and key results. It's a methodology where between two teams, you are determining what is an objective that you want to achieve, right? So let's say, for example, you're driving, a product feature set of features that within 2 quarters you want to achieve 50% or drive an MVP. So that's a very and that's a very critical goal. And you have smart goals, and you have sometimes even shared goals that you determine. And the OKR, as I said, objectives and key results, right? The key results are the smart part, where you have it's measurable, right? So
Right.
I think coming to that agreement, that alignment really helps set a roadmap, right, for how you want to have the delivery done, and also kind of rallying the team towards these goals, and also a lot of clarity in how you would achieve the goals, right? So again, these are some very generic tools that I have seen also being leveraged in other companies, and also in the startups that I had worked, we had leveraged these tools and framework, and I think just helps us get the structure in place.
So, Kavita, thank you for explaining this framework, GRPI. So, let me go explaining the pyramid from top. So, just to make sure that my understanding is right. So, first thing you do is define the goals. So, where is the North Star, where the team is heading? That's one of the most important things to bring the clarity in the team. For that, you use OKR, objective key results. And I think that's one of the best way to do these things, to define your goals, because you will have very clear KPIs and you will know when you achieved it or not. So define the goals. Second is define the roles. And this becomes very important when you are forming a new team, who's doing what. And for role, you can use a RACI metrics. And the team should have a very clear understanding who's doing what and who's responsible for what and who's accountable. After RACI, then next layer is about processes. And processes, most of the time, people are using Agile, and you can have Scrum or Kanban or whatever. Basically, make sure that you spend some time defining the processes and the team understanding. Because I remember in my last job, we were forming the team so fast and hiring so many people from different companies, and everybody has their own notion what is Agile, what is Scrum. So basically, bring the whole team to one understanding that what is the process. And after the process, the last, which is the base of the pyramid, is about interpersonal relationship. People should understand who is who in the team and what are strength and weakness and things like that. So that's GRPI framework. So very well. So thank you very much for explaining that. Any last comments you would like to add to make it more effective?
Thank you, Rafat. And I think you were spot on in terms of how you summarize the GRPI and the various tools. This is not the only framework on team effectiveness. There's also, something called forming, storming, norming, and performing, which was
Right.
actually leveraged or incepted by Bruce Tuckman. He was a psychologist and a great one. And there are multiple such frameworks out there, but there's no cookie cutter way to use, but depending on the situation and the scenario, you would want to use different ones. Last but not least, I want to emphasize the importance of the role of the manager. More and more, the managers are getting to be more prepared with hiring diverse talent, right? There's a lot of diversity and inclusion concepts that managers have to be familiar with. And also, how do you continue to engage your talent is by making sure that you are providing, unbiased, or, understanding your own biases. So the more familiar you become with what your conscious biases or unconscious biases are, I think that's important.
Mhm.
Diversity and talent. I think more and more companies are hiring global talent, and you have to gear towards more inclusive and diverse teams. And
Mhm.
third and last is reskilling and upskilling, right? Constantly making sure that your team has the right skills. So give them opportunities to be trained, and yourself as a manager as well to look at reskilling and upskilling opportunities. So with that,
Oh,
I want to thank you, Rafat, and that those were my final thoughts and key nuggets to take away.